Hi, I'm Scott and welcome to Synth Stuff, and this is Keybed. This is what happens when you're an idiot and while editing your video you manage to delete your intro. So I don't have an intro to this video. Instead, you get to see Keybed while I tell you that this video is about the new Roland GAIA 2 and how it differs from the original Roland GAIA. Coming up. So unless you have been under a rock for the last 2 weeks, or maybe your internet wasn't working, then you might not have heard about the new GAIA 2 from Roland. If you have had internet in the last 2 weeks, no doubt you have been inundated with videos from creators who were given free new GAIA 2s from Roland. They got it like a month or two early, so they were able to learn it and then put out lots of great content on the release day of the GAIA 2. Contrary to what several people have written in my comments of my videos, I do not get free synthesizers. The manufacturers don't send me free stuff. Somebody wrote recently that I had a Sweetwater shirt on, and obviously because I had a Sweetwater shirt on, it meant that Sweetwater sponsored me and sent me all kinds of free stuff, and I don't disclose it, and I'm a shill for Sweetwater. No. Sweetwater, if you want to send me free stuff, yes, I'm more than available to take care of free synthesizers. I will say that my rep at Sweetwater did send me a jar of Sweetwater candy on my birthday this year. So, or was it last year? Maybe it was last year. Yeah, it was last year. They sent me a jar of Sweetwater candy on my birthday last year. So we're talking about the GAIA and the GAIA 2. What is the GAIA? The GAIA has been around for, I think, about 13 years. I have done a full review on the GAIA. I'll put a link to it up here or somewhere up wherever it ends up going. If you want to know everything there is to know about the GAIA, I suggest you go have a look at that video. I go through all the different functions, talk about how it works and how it's programmed. I actually did another video recently about the GAIA, talking about how its oscillators work, because it's a virtual analog, but the oscillators aren't quite what you think they are. I'll put a link to that up here again, and I'll put a link to both of them in the description below in case you don't see them on the screen. So, the new GAIA 2 is supposed to replace this one. This GAIA, which has been around forever, it was discontinued just a couple of months ago. This GAIA is most notable in that it is an early virtual analog synth, but it really took the market by storm because it brought new functionality to the world of virtual analog synthesizers that had never been seen before. Mainly, it has 3 tones, and each of those tones is a complete separate synthesizer. So each of these tones has its own oscillator, own filter, own amplifier, so you could actually, it's basically 3-part multi-timbral, but you can layer those parts and get just tremendous, huge, fat sounds. That was unheard of back then. The GAIA, when it came out, it really revolutionized virtual analog synthesis. It is a follow-on really to the JP8000. One of the other main reasons it was revolutionary is because it had knob per function controls. Every single function had a control. As you notice, there's no display. There's no menu diving. Everything you need to do, you access with a control on it. So this was used by schools everywhere, including at Sweetwater, to teach synthesis because you aren't deep into menu diving. It's like Juno 106, what you see is what you get. SH-01, what you see is what you get. You just directly manipulate the controls on there, and those controls have an immediate effect. There's no menu diving to find arcane functions that are used seldom enough that they don't put them as a control on the front panel. Yes, this is great for beginners, and I listed this one in my beginner's synth video. Again, link up there or down in the description. I listed a top 10 synthesizers for beginners. So yes, it's a great beginner synth, but it's quite usable. It's compact, it's light, it sounds really good. You can store lots of presets in it. You can store layers. You can make almost piano sounds. You can make some really good organ sounds. All of the classic analog synthesizer sounds of the 70s and 80s and 90s, this can do. So it can grow with you. This, for a while, was my live synth because it's small, light, portable. It's Velcroed down to my stand, but it is small, light, and portable. Easy to use, easy to move. You can actually run it on batteries if you want, and it just sounds good. There are a couple of questionable features like the D-beam where you can actually move your hand to adjust the sound. Okay, it's kind of gimmicky. I never really used it. I just used the Roland stick. And then, of course, we had V-Link, which was this feature where Roland was supposedly going to have all these units that had V-Link capability that could do live video generation for a show. So as you played this, the V-Link would generate video and give you a video. Anyway, it went nowhere. Roland never actually developed it, so the V-Link kind of just went away. Okay, so why am I talking about the Gaia? Because obviously the Gaia 2 came out. Roland didn't send me one, but I have one anyway. So here it is as it arrived today. As you notice, FedEx did a spectacular job of delivering it undamaged with their usual care and attention. So some of the packing material is missing. I have a feeling the candy is gone because usually the candy is where this packing is. That's not great. That means no Sweetwater candy came with this one. Oh, what do you know? The candy was at the other end. All right, I got my Sweetwater candy. And of course, I got another sticker to add to the collection. All right, here we go. The Roland Gaia. I hear something's moving around inside there. That's not a good sign. All right, let's open this up. By the way, it's a good idea to open these things on video like I'm doing here. That way, if there is any damage, you have it immediately documented. All right. Okay, it looks all right. Put it over here. Oh, it looks like that's what was floating around inside. And it looks like that used to be glued there. So apparently that got knocked off. And user manual, power cord. And by the way, if I didn't explain, the reason I had the Sweetwater shirt is because I bought it with my own money. I like Sweetwater. I like them as a company. So I like to support them, and I think they have cool t-shirts. So anyway, so there is the Gaia 2. I do definitely notice a difference in the power cords. The original Gaia has a very thick and heavy-duty power cord, and the new Gaia 2 has this awful, thin, fragile, easily broken power cord that Roland supplies with all their synthesizers today. All right, new day, new shirt, new synthesizer. The old Gaia is up here in place of the old Gaia, which is down here. I have the old Gaia, it works fine. It did what I needed it to do, so why did I buy the new Gaia? Good question. Now, when you think about it, the new Gaia is just another wrapper around Roland's same old tired Zen-Core synth. It's inside the Jupiter XM, it's inside the Jupiter X, inside the Juno X. It's basically the same synthesizer with a little bit of different firmware to make it operate a bit differently and have some different features. But inside, it's the same synthesizer. So Roland is just repackaging the same thing over and over again in different cases and calling them by different names and hoping that people will just keep buying the same thing over and over again, right? Kind of. I mean, yes, this will load model expansions, just like the new Jupiter X and the Juno X will do, and the Phantom. You can load model expansions, you can load the Jupiter 8, and you can load the Juno 106 and the JX8P. Interestingly, in the manual for the Gaia 2, where it has a picture of the screens of the models loaded, it has a Juno 60 model expansion. However, they've blocked it out, but they've done so in a way that you can still tell that it says Juno 60. There is no Juno 60 model expansion, at least not announced, so apparently there will be a Juno 60 model expansion that is going to be announced for at least the Gaia 2 and most likely for other synthesizers as well. As it comes, the Gaia 2 comes with an SH-01 model expansion built into it, so it actually emulates the Roland SH-101. However, the difference is that the model expansion of the SH-101 in the Gaia 2 is polyphonic, whereas the SH-101, the original one, is monophonic. Okay, so it does model expansions. It still doesn't explain why I actually bought this. And the reason why is because of the sound. I mean, when I first heard this announced, I thought, oh geez, another Roland rehash. And it appealed to me as much as the original Juno X and the Jupiter X did, which is basically not much. It has the same awful low resolution LCD screen that I don't know why they're all, the Wave State has it, the OP6, they're all using these tiny little LCD screens that the fonts are really blocky. I did a whole video on this, I'll put it up here, complaining about these screens. So it's obviously the same engine inside, but the sound in all the demos that I heard of this were just different. I mean, they were definitely Roland. I mean, you hear the sound of this thing, and it's no question, this is a Roland. It has Roland vibe to all the sounds, but they're new, they're different, and what it can do just sounds different. It's not a rehashed Jupiter or Juno or whatnot. You aren't going to be getting piano or PCM sounds out of it like a Jupiter X, but it does have a unique engine all to itself. I have read that it is actually derived from the Enzyme engine, which you can actually get for the Phantom, but it is unique to itself, plus it has all the controls, knob for function controls on the synthesizer itself, which is just like the original Gaia. Knob for function controls. You can actually get and edit the sounds just by moving the controls. On the Phantom, you have all these model expansions and you can edit all that stuff, but you're doing it on the touch screen and editing and menus and so on, whereas this, you got knobs to twist. And they have actually brought across some of the stuff that was in the original Gaia. You can see the lineage in the Gaia 2. There are some concepts that have been brought across directly. So Roland really has tried to make the Gaia 2 an evolution of the original Gaia. They've taken the functionality and concepts of the original Gaia, without V-Link, of course, and then they've just added to it. They've given you more capability, more sounds, better effects, better filters. So it's just basically, it's more. So it's the original Gaia on steroids. So let's put them side by side and see exactly where that provenance is and what they brought across from the old Gaia, and see what the actual changes and additions are that they've brought into the new Gaia 2. Looking at the back, we have a DC input with a power switch and then a USB-C computer input. Thank you, Roland, for being dragged kicking and screaming into the 2010s by adding USB-C finally to a synthesizer. You can actually power the synthesizer from a phone charger that will put out 1.5 amps or a USB power supply for a phone just by plugging it into that USB-C port. Then we can plug in, this is a class compliant USB port here. You can plug in an external MIDI controller, it will drive it directly, or you can plug in a flash key and you can store backups and sound expansions, and it's also how you upgrade it. We have headphones out, regular left and right outputs, we have our pedal, and a set of standard 5-pin MIDI jacks. All right, so the first thing we need to do is check the firmware. So we're going to go into utility and see info, and the firmware is old, 1.02. So we're going to update that. And the way we do that is the typical Roland sneakernet. So everything Roland, including the flagship Phantom firmware updates, involve downloading things to USB keys and sticking it in. You can't do it by plugging it into your computer. I mean, so many of the synthesizers now, like the Summit and all the modal synths, everything, you just hook it up to your computer and you run the companion app or connect to the website and it just says, oh, you need an update. You want to do it? And you say, yep, and then it does it. And that's it. You're done. No interaction. It just figures it out on its own. Roland does the exact opposite. It's like 1990 all over again. You got to download zip files, unpack the zip file, format the USB correctly, and then unpack the zip file, bin file onto this one, and then stick it in the memory slot at the back. Oops. And of course, it's upside down. And then you have to hold down menu and then turn it on while you're holding down menu. And you can see it's now doing the update of firmware. Not as bad as the Phantom. The Phantom's even worse. It's like 3 or 4 steps. You have to put the key into like multiple ports so that it can update different parts of the synthesizer. It's just ridiculous. Now, actually adding expansions onto this is even worse because you have to take your USB key and then use Roland Cloud to download your license to the USB key and install that, and then confirm the license in here, and then take the USB key back to the computer and load the expansion file on there, unpack it from the zip file onto the USB, back into here, pick the zip file one by one, install each package. It's such a hassle. Just like the Phantom, just like all the Roland synths, the user experience for updates of this sort are horrendous. I don't know why Roland just is stuck in the 1990s doing updates over USB keys. I mean, you might as well have a floppy disk in here that we're doing firmware updates from. In any case, it's obviously doing its firmware update right now. The USB key, we can write all the configurations and the user tones out to the USB key, and as a backup, so that if you were to say, for instance, go somewhere where you're going to perform, and the back line is going to, they're going to give you a GAIA 2. You could take your USB key, plug it into the GAIA 2 they give you, restore it, assuming it's the same firmware, and it will be identical to the one you have at home in your studio. You can also, instead of just backing up everything where it backups all the configuration, the menu configurations, and all your sounds, you can just export just your user sounds to the USB key, and you can name those separately. So if you want to back up every so often and name them with the date that you're doing it, you can do that and store all those on the USB key. Or if you had a whole bunch of different user sound sets that you wanted to store and recall, then you can do that as well. Okay, updated items, please power off, which we will do. Power it back up. We should get the new version. GAIA 2, very nice. Okay, menu, and we'll check utility, info. Now we're on 1.1, which is the current version. So I'm going to format the USB key, gets rid of the firmware file I have on there, so now my key is empty. If I wanted to, I could go into here and say File and Backup. I could say Backup GAIA 2, and I could change it. So if I wanted to change the name of whatever I was going to back it up as, I could change that here. And we say, and then how do we get over to OK? There we go, OK. And we say yes, OK. And so now I've backed up all the configurations and all the user presets onto the USB key. If I wanted to, I can go back to File and say Restore, and there's the file that I just created. Same thing for import, export. We're going to just export. We could say we want to do just, maybe this sound. Oh, menu mark. So let's say we want to export this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. I wonder if there's a way of marking all of them. Oh yeah, so if you hold down menu and then just spin it, then I guess you can mark all of them, just like that. So there I've marked all of them, and enter, and it's going to be called GAIA 2 tones, that's fine, and we're export it, and away it goes. So now we're exporting all those 512 user tones, and we can import it, and there it is. Okay, so very nice. That is somewhat similar to the original GAIA. Of course, the original GAIA didn't have a menu on it, so that we couldn't go in and select all the different files that we were going to use. We just had a single export of 64 user sounds on there. So that is also a very important difference, in that the original GAIA has 64 factory presets on it and 64 user tones for a total of 128 patch slots, which is not a lot. That was a huge limitation, actually, that I repeatedly came up against on the GAIA. And because you could only store one user set of patches on the USB key, you ended up having to carry multiple USB keys if you wanted to swap different sounds into your user bank. And you only were able to save and load all 64 of the user banks at the same time on the original GAIA. On the original GAIA, we have preset patches, user patches, then we have a bank A through H, and then a patch 1 through 8, which gives us 64 presets and 64 user patches. On the GAIA 2, we have A through H again, but those are groups. So what we do is we hit Shift, and we can pick. You can see we're changing through groups, F, G, H. So that's 8 of those. Each of those then has a bank of 1 through 8. And then each of those banks has a patch of 1 through 8. So that is 8 groups of 8 banks of 8 patches, which means we have 256 preset patches. These are ones that you cannot change that are preset from the factory. Then we have another 256 user patches, which are ones that are populated from the factory. You can see there are sounds in there. However, you can overwrite them if you want. Then we have the model expansion over here, which again, another 256 presets for, I believe, each model. And we do have an init patch, which we can do here. Simply hitting init gives us an init tone. That's nice that they've done that. And also a manual mode, which the original Gaia also had. So if we hit shift in manual, then it's going to say reflect the panel state. Yes, I'm sure. So now we get nothing because we have nothing set up on the panel to give us any sound. Now the original Gaia had a phrase recorder, which was an absolutely useless thing that all it did was record in real time whatever you were playing, and then you could play it back. It was not synchronized to BPM or tempo. It's really kind of just like a looper, except it doesn't loop. So it was really kind of useless. We did have mono, we have a tempo, we do have our 3 tones, and we can transpose arpeggios. That's about it. We do have a pitch shifter, you know, a modicum of effects here, the ability to plug in an external output or external input. On the Gaia 2, we again have 3 oscillators. However, whereas on the original Gaia, we had 3 individual synthesizers. We had each tone had its own oscillator, its own filter, its own amplifier, and it could be treated as 3 separate synthesizers. This one is more traditional, where we have the 3 oscillators all then coming through a mixer, which then feeds into the filter and the amplifier, so all 3 tones share the common filter and amplifier. That means it's a little less flexible than the original Gaia, which let you have 3 completely separate tones or that you could build up and layer together. With this one, you can layer your oscillators, but you're limited to that single filter and amplifier, so it's a little less flexible than the original Gaia in that regards. The original Gaia had a single LFO. This one has 2 LFOs. And of course, this one has a screen that makes it a lot easier to edit things, but it also means that you have now menu diving, which we didn't have in the Gaia, because that said, there were a lot of functions in the Gaia where by necessity it had to have extra functionality to change MIDI channels, that sort of thing. And to do so, you had to learn and memorize these arcane button presses. So if you pressed this button and then that button, it did one thing, but if you press this button and that button, so it repurposed the buttons, but it wasn't, you couldn't just figure it out by looking at it. You had to have the manual, or what I did is I just I created myself a cheat sheet that I kept nearby. This one obviously has a sequencer in it. The original Gaia did not. The new Gaia has chord mode in it, where I can, let's find something I can play. You can play a chord into it and then just play 1 key chords as a result. The original Gaia did not have that. It does have a switch for velocity, so if you have a tone that uses velocity, such as this one, you can actually turn that off, and now every key press gets full velocity if you need that. The new Gaia, of course, has this motional pad, which I haven't really talked about, and I will cover that in my review. This is not meant to be a exhaustive review of everything that this thing does. It's just trying to compare what's new and what's different. We do have the same bank and tone buttons as we do on the original Gaia. They do light up, not quite as bright. These are subtle blue, which I think is actually kind of cool. We do have the 3 separate oscillators. We do not have the separate filters and amps. The new Gaia has 3 different filter slopes instead of 2. However, we only have 3 filter types, whereas the original Gaia had 4. We have the ability to assign LFOs. It doesn't quite have a mod matrix, but it does allow you to assign things like the motional pad and LFOs and things in ways that's approaching the functionality of a mod matrix, but not quite. Whereas the original Gaia had none of that. Everything was just hardwired. It worked the way Roland said it was going to work from the factory. And of course, whereas the original Gaia was just strictly virtual analog with different waveforms for the different tones or oscillators, this one has 2 oscillators, 2 and 3, which are just like that, where they are virtual analog oscillators. However, the first oscillator is a wavetable, and you can see we can scroll through all the different waves available to us in there. One of the things I did notice was the knobs on the new Gaia don't feel quite as solid and high quality as the original Gaia. The original Gaia, the knobs really, they were kind of rubberized, and I don't know, they just glided really nicely. The new Gaia, I mean, especially in the range, this is a knob that's actually a switch, and it's switching between these different items, but the detent between the different levels is really, really light. Like, you could almost bump these very easily out of place, and I would expect that for something where you're switching in between individual ranges, like on an oscillator here, you want a solid detent between them, and that's definitely not there. So the control, let's see, the cutoff feels all right, but these knobs, I mean, they're not quite as solid as the original Gaia. They don't feel quite as I don't know if they feel as high quality as the original Gaia. The keybed itself, I don't know. I think I actually prefer the keybed on the new one to the old one. The keybed on the new Gaia, I think I prefer. The original Gaia had, you know, distortion and flanger and delay and reverb, and that's about it. In terms of effects, they were good effects. For the time, they were good effects, but compared to what you have now, they didn't really hold up. The effects in the Gaia 2 are exceptional. There's 53 multi-effects in here, and there's a couple really notable ones in there. There's some guitar simulators that are really good. It has an emulation of the JD800 multi-effects modulator. So that is, in the JD800, you have this multi-effects mode where it has different effects that you can sequence and set up in different orders and different types and so on. And this has that entire multi-effects section built in as one of its selectable effects, which is fantastic because that sounds really, really good. It also has, of course, the Juno 106 chorus in it. I assume you can turn the noise on and off just like you can all the other Roland Juno 106 emulations. The original Gaia has an arpeggiator, but it is preset only. You have preset arpeggiating patterns that you can pick from, and there's quite a few of them in there, but you can't put your own ones into it. This one has an arpeggiator that plays up and down and all the rest of it, but you can also do note sequence. So if you want to play a little arpeggio pattern into it, and then just use that as your arpeggio, it will do that no problem whatsoever. One thing that I really, really am not impressed with, the original Gaia has the Roland controller. It has a bender and a modulation, so it's got this stick, you can just flick it, and that is a Roland standby. Roland always uses these sticks. It of course has the D-beam, but okay, no D-beam, but we do have the motional pad. On the new Gaia, we have a pitch and mod wheel, and they are tiny. They're the same size as the JDXi. Now they are not the miserable plastic ones the JDXi has, but they are really tiny, and I mean, especially for the mod wheel, you have almost no travel there at all. So the ability to modulate is not great. I mean, they are rubber coated, so they're easy to grip. I guess I guess they're okay for what they are, but if it was going to have only just these wheels, I wish they were, you know, a standard size, not these little miniature ones like they use on the JDXi. Actually, no, I wish it had a stick, like a Roland stick, because that's what I expect from a Roland synthesizer, and that's what I would have expected this one to have. I have gone through a few of these presets. They're universally great. And if you've heard any of the other YouTube reviews on this, all of the presets in this thing just sound great. Roland has just outdone themselves on the factory presets, both in the factory and the user section. I have not gone through all of them yet, but I have yet to find one that was a dud. They are just really good, and it really shows off the capability of the engine that Roland has built for the new Gaia 2. And that, in a nutshell, is why I bought this. While I'm kind of sad that the old Roland Gaia is going away, and yeah, if you want to buy it, I will be selling this. It's not going on sale yet because I got to go dig the box out, and the manuals and all the rest of the stuff goes with it. But yeah, this is a great synthesizer, especially if you want to just learn synthesis. This is, you can't do better than the Roland Gaia, the original Gaia. The new Gaia 2 is a far more capable synthesizer. Of course, it's double the price than the old Gaia, but along with that doubled price, it brings incredible functionality, modern sounds, a lot of capability in terms of synth engines, plus of course the SH-01, which I don't really need, seeing as I have an SH-101 right there, but it does give you that, along with newer effects. USB capability, has a USB sound card built into it. You can feed USB audio in and out. It's a thoroughly modernized version of the original Roland Gaia, which it should be. A few shortcomings, definitely a few shortcomings, definitely a little bit less money spent on the control surfaces and maybe the build quality. I mean, this is a really solid unit. That's pretty solid, but it's not the tank like the original Gaia was. There will be a full review on the Gaia 2 forthcoming. I've read through the manual. I'm getting pretty familiar with it now. As soon as I have my head fully wrapped around all the capabilities, I will be doing an in-depth review on the Gaia 2, so watch for that. In the meantime, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, corrections, please leave them in the comments section below. I really appreciate all you guys helping out, leaving comments, letting me know what you like, what you'd like to see. And of course, please click like and subscribe on the video. It really helps me out when you do that, and it helps me get more of these videos out to everybody who likes synthesizers. It tells YouTube that people who like synthesizers like my videos, and then it shows them to more people who like synthesizers, which means I can do more videos on synthesizers. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching.